Batman has Robin, Wonder Woman has Black Canary, and I am lucky to have Anna Meyer. What we have in common, except for that I don't generally jump from roofs, is that we have a sparring partner who has our back, who fights evil with us, who's there in the quest for good. But something that most of us underestimate is that without them, our personal worlds would be far more lonely. Just for one moment, imagine how that would feel to have that tribe behind your back. People who continue fighting when you need a good night of sleep. People who advise you, who give you critical feedback, and who cheer for you when you do something well. Because let's face it, the life of a change agent is very, very draining. There's lack everywhere. Lack of funding, lack of resources, lack of collaborators, lack of political support. And then there are also those voices in our head, which are also full of lack. Many of us don't feel we've done enough. And then we sometimes feel like this planet is just going to pieces and we'll never be able to do more. And all of that just amounts to what we at Finding Sustainia call change agent loneliness. And we could say that because we chose to be change agents, we just deserved it. I mean, we asked for it. We knew about it. So what's the big deal? But at Finding Sustainia, we'd like to redefine what we as change agents often deem as normal. Mindvalley CEO Vishen Lakhiani talks about rules, which are cultural norms we don't question, but that we should question. And so today, I'd like to advocate that we start to question norms around change agents and how we're supposed to feel. At Finding Sustainia, we've come up with a method that we call the VISH method. It's a scientific method that takes us through the stumbling blocks, but starts with a vision. It's important to have a better vision of what change agents should be feeling like, and then intuit it. Because if we just say we want to be happy change agents, that doesn't really do the difference. There needs to be more. There needs to be that sense that we feel nourished, that we feel supported, that we have access to resources that does it for us. And then, and only then, we should look at the stumbling blocks because they are really there. And then we can go further and look at the what ifs and the hows and start strategizing. And this prepares us. Because often, for instance, in the German context, we think of the stumbling blocks first, and then our results are pretty hesitant. And then there are those of us who just envision that beautiful big future. And if I'm honest, I used to be amongst those. I'm very idealistic. But what happens is that our brain already feels like this has happened. But then when the stumbling blocks come, we crash. And so it's important to start with that and then go into strategizing. And that is a much softer and better way for us to go into it. And so today, before I go far more into this method, and I don't want to bore you, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of interesting TEDx talks before, I'd like to take you through Wish. My wish for all the change agents in Berlin and all over the world, and maybe even Martians, if they happen to listen to us, is that we feel nourished and supported in ourselves. Okay. That we feel motivated and productive. That we also know ourselves, because that's another thing that's really important. Some of us are introverted. Some of us are extroverted. Some of us are ambivalent. But it's important to know thyself and then work with what you have. Just imagine you had that sense of a tribe that has your back, of your friends and family supporting you, and having these kinds of sparring partners in the world that you can ask for advice. In the we, imagine that in your team, in your organization, your managers don't make you work harder than is good for you. That you have managers and organizations and a general norm that supports a healthy life-work balance, and that you can still be passionate about being a change agent. And then in the world, I'd like us to have access to funds that we are seen as vital pillars of society, as superstars, and not only those vocal and charismatic ones, but actually also those quiet ones that often form the backbone of change. Just imagine if we had access to universal basic income and how nourishing and healthy that would feel for us. For just a moment, I'd like you to be in that moment and ask yourself, are you desiring this better me in a better world so much that you can feel and taste it, and so much that you're also willing to work for it and towards it? The reason why I'm propagating a tribe and not just a network, thanks to my Indian heritage. In India, we see things more from a collective point of view. We come from a place of service to our community and less from a place of struggle. Whereas in Western communities, we come to our networks well-dressed and rehearsed, like today, and we present ourselves, but we don't get to that space and warmth and comfort that your tribe would offer you. And at Finding Sustainia, we have researched on those several stumbling blocks we change agents face. Before that, we used to be specialized on sustainable change, and that's still our core. But we have looked at ways how we can actually sustain those trying to sustain these worlds. And there are several stumbling blocks around the me, which come from mindset, self-talks, boundaries and compassion, when to say no, when to say yes. Then there are things like presentation skills, social media, marketing skills. There are a lot of skill sets that we lack. And then in the we, it's often support from our friends and family who can quite often be just neutral around us. Maybe don't get us or think we don't get it. There's a lot of friction around that. And then in the world, it is running against a system which encourages economic growth and profit over social and environmental well-being. In many ways, the system is set up to make us feel burnt out and depleted. And in comparison to normal burnout, which often comes from lack of purpose, change agents burn themselves out because they burn for a cause. All I can say is, I'm better because I have a tribe. I went from a maverick change agent who did pretty well, but I had that sense and idea of doing it all by myself, running against the system, to a we, because I found my Anna Meyer in 2014, and we started to have each other's backs and support each other, give each other feedback, and have a common why. And then suddenly, we had that wonderful team of Janine, of Anne, of Abhinav, of Andrea, and we formed this invincible capsule, which felt like something, it felt like a safe space, even though it hasn't at all impacted our capacity to fight for what we believe is right. And then there are my friends and family. There is Barbara, there's Franz, there's Stephanie, there's Birgit, and there's Ian, and my kids, Monisha and Anando. You may be asking yourself why I'm doing all this name dropping. Of course, I'm trying to acknowledge them by name, but they are someone to me. And I'd like to invite you to see who's your Anna, who's your Barbara, who's your Ian, and get that kind of nourishment from that and also nourish those spaces. Because a lot of us are so much in that survival mode that we forgot to look out for and nourish those things that work for us. So now, right now, I'd like you to look into yourself and see what really nourishes you, what depletes you. For instance, me. I'm not very good at protesting. I believe in protesting, but what happens is that I get very drained. I'm much better in giving workshops, propagating positive change as opposed to running against something. That's something that other people are good at. And the more you know about yourself by doing a Myers-Briggs test, for instance, or the Stanford Saboteur test, the better you can work within what is in you. And if we do the same in our team, and this way we also find a better sense of cohesion with each other, so everyone can live in their unique superpower. So for today, here in Berlin and all over the world, I'd like all of us to be and become the change agents we'd like to see in the world and be reunited with your tribe. Thank you very much for your attention.